Hey everyone, my name is Raymond and you're watching Board Game Heaven. Today I'm going to be reviewing Time of Legends Joan of Arc by Mythic Games, which is a war game that uses miniatures. It's a tactical war game for 2 to 4 players that has over 230 miniatures in the core game alone. And it has modular tiles, it has a lot of content and lots of expansions already. And I'd like to thank Az and Leo of Mythic Games for providing me with this game to review. And Mythic will also have a new Kickstarter in the fall of 2019 with a new expansion called Time of Legends Joan of Arc Teutonic Knights. And it will have new units and new scenarios to play. And you'll also be able to get the 1.5 version of the core game, as well as all the existing content for the game, including the plunder box, which has additional bases, and the dice tower as well. And returning backers will also be able to get a 1.5 update kit for the new game, which you will get for free if you pledge for at least $20 on other products on their Kickstarter. And there will also be a deluxe storage box, which will be able to hold all the cards, the tiles, the dice, the tokens, and more. And Mythic is also working on a solution for an actual insert for the game, so you can store your miniatures more easily. And if you'd like to see my unboxing video of Time of Legends Joan of Arc, just click the I in the top right corner of this video and I'll show all the content in more detail. But now I'll start with showing you how to set up the game, and then I'll explain the basic rules, and finally I'll give you my final thoughts. And if you're short on time, you can skip right to the summary of my findings by clicking the timestamps in the description below this video. Anyway, let's get started. To set up a game of Time of Legends Joan of Arc, first you choose if you want to play battle mode or a scenario. For the battle mode, you can find a PDF on the Mythic Games website with an army list and unit costs, so you can build your own army. It's 1500 or 2500 points in the current rules, and it has a few suggested map setups to play on. You can also design your own maps. The pre-made scenarios can be found in the scenario book and online on the Mythic Games website as well. Each scenario in the scenario book has a list of units each army is using, as well as any civilians that are used in the scenario. It lists the victory conditions for both sides and any rewards you can gain during the game, and it also lists any special rules that apply in this scenario. It also shows you how to set up the map, and you have to pay attention to the numbers and the orientation of the numbers of the individual tiles, because the graphic may sometimes be different from the actual setup. And it also shows you where to put down the civilians, the army units, and any scenery miniatures. After setting up the map tiles, place one tree in each forest area and one rocky outcrops in each rocks area, unless stated otherwise. Scenarios will also tell you where to place rally points for each army, and some scenarios will even have buildings in certain places, and there are tiles for those, as well as actual miniatures in the game that you can place on top of those. All players also take a player board and all the cards and miniatures that they picked in battle mode or that are allocated to them by the scenario. Some character cards have a second character card that is used when leveling up, and you just place them underneath that character. Now it's a level 1 character, and when you spend 3 XP, you can take that card and either put it on the holy side or the unholy side and level up that character. Next, you take the colored base rings, usually red for the English armies and blue for the French armies. And there is also black for the unholy mythical armies and white for the holy mythical armies. And you can also use those rings if you happen to have units in your army that use the same miniatures. For example, these militia bowmen here use the same art and miniatures as the regular bowman. So to distinguish which is which, you can just pick one of those colors let's say black in this case, and just put that on one of those units to indicate that that is the militia bowman and the other ones are the regular bowmen. Then determine who starts first and give that player the first player token. All players also receive the indicated resources, so these activation cubes, legend tokens, XP tokens, reroll tokens, and any legend cards indicated by the scenario. The green ones are for the tactical battles, and the red ones are for the mythical battles. And some units also have extras, such as these bowmen. They receive stakes, so I've got 4 bowmen units, which means I also receive 4 of these stakes miniatures that I can use during the game. Each player also takes one of these player aids, which is a double-sided leaflet that explains the round phases, the die results on the doom die results on the attack and defense dice, how the hexes are divided into areas and what type of areas there are, and those are explained as well as they have certain effects on the game. It explains what barricades, stakes and walls do and how building interior works. It explains all the different skills that units can have, and this is very important to know because all of these are printed on the cards, and this text explains exactly what they do, which is very handy to have as a reference. And then there's these orders. You have your regular activations, reactivations, interrupts and charges. And they are used in the game as cubes, but you can also have banners with stickers on them if you took the plunder box. There are several icons that you can find on all the unit cards as well that are explained here. It explains all the tokens that you have in the game, the different types of cards that there are, the different types of dice, and some effects that you might find on some of those cards. So once all that is set up, you can take the battle board, or if you have the player mat, the battle board is already printed on it, and that's placed next to your map setup. Next, you shuffle and place the War Council map on the indicated spot and turn over 3 cards, or less if that is indicated by the scenario. Next, take the round cards as indicated by the scenario and place them on the indicated spot. Then shuffle and place either the remaining tactics or mythical legend cards somewhere near the battle board. If there are units in a scenario with a speech bubble icon, then also take the corresponding discussion cards, unless specified otherwise. And the same goes for any intrigue cards that you may have for each side of the armies. Next, place all the remaining resource cubes, XP tokens, legend tokens and wound tokens near the board, as well as the 2 equipment decks. Any civilians used in the scenario are placed on the board and their cards are placed nearby. And after all players have placed their units on the indicated spots of the scenario or inside the deployment areas of the battle map, you are ready to play Time of Legends Joan of Arc. Before I can start explaining all the rules for Time of Legends Joan of Arc, I need to explain all these icons on the cards that you'll be using. Now, for example, this card has this red faction logo over here. That means he's part of the English army, and there are different of these faction symbols for all the different armies. Some level 2 characters also have an additional faction to them. For example, this one has the Unholy or the Holy faction symbol in addition to the English faction. On the top you will see the name of the unit, and on the right, in case of a character, it has a level symbol. This means this character is level up. It takes 3 experience tokens to level it up, and then you can flip the card around or take another card that has the level 2 on it, and then it will be level 2 and have upgraded abilities. Over here on the left is the attack stat, and that icon represents the type of attack, melee or shooting. So this is for melee, this is for ranged attacks. In case of ranged attacks, it also indicates a number, which is the number of hex tiles that it can shoot away from where it is. And below those icons is the number and color of dice that they roll in offense. On the right is the defense stat and the number and color of dice they roll for that. Over here is the type of unit that this unit is. It can be infantry, cavalry like these, or war machines or flying. Characters will also have a number of hit points in the bottom left, and that is the amount of wound tokens the unit can suffer before being destroyed. Units with no number over here are destroyed when they receive 1 wound. This icon over here is the command stat, and it tells you the range and the number of allied troop units that can be commanded. So for example, this tells you that 1 hex away, this unit can command 1 unit, and this one, for example, 2 hexes away can command 2 units. There's also units that have an A on it, like this one, and that means only on adjacent areas, which can be on the same tile. And of course, they can only command areas with allied units in them. Below the artwork, there is their special skill. So this is an engineer. This character has charisma and prayer. This one has haste too, and these have nothing. And all those skills are explained in the rulebook and can also be found on your player aid. And most cards also have specific powers. So these are unique abilities specific to that unit. Some civilians also have this discussion icon over there, and that indicates that the unit is one that can be spoken with. As you have seen, these hex tiles have different kinds of areas on them, and a tile can consist of either 1, 2, or 3 individual areas. Each area contains a single type of terrain. There is plains, which are these grassy areas, fields, the yellow areas, forests, these with the trees, swamps with the roots. There are also rocky areas like this. There are hills like that one over there. And there are village areas like this one with the cobblestones. Each type of terrain has features that can give bonuses or penalties to units within them. And an area can only contain 1 player's units at a time, plus civilians. If it contains units from your side, then that area is considered an allied area. If it has enemy units, then it's an enemy area. All areas that share a border are considered adjacent to each other. So for example, these 2 areas are adjacent, but these 2 are not. Each area also has a certain capacity. So a large area, which is a complete hex, can have 8 individual units on it. And this is considered 1 unit, and this as well. So even if there are multiple miniatures on one base, that is still 1 unit. So like I said, large areas can have 8 units on them. A half hex can have 6 units, and a third, like this one, can have 4 units on one space. Some units that are creatures or war machines have a size of 3 if they have the big skill, and they take up more space. Forest areas usually get one of these trees, and that also takes up 1 space. The same goes for areas that have bushes and rocks, for example. And any other terrain elements, such as small buildings, ruins, a shrine, a well, they also have a size of 1. There is also a bigger house and even a church, and those have a size of 2. There are also sky tiles, which are used for flying units. Buildings always have a building tile overlay, such as this, and it has a number in the corner telling you how many units can be inside that building. An interior is considered to be adjacent to the ground area surrounding it. A unit can only enter a building if it's located in that area surrounding it. A building interior is the only area that can contain both allied and enemy units. Those units are then considered adjacent to each other. Only infantry units can enter a building. Walls and stakes are not terrain elements and do not occupy any space in an area. They are always placed in an area along one of its borders and serve as markers to indicate combat modifiers for units in that area if they are attacked through that border. Certain units have the engineer skill, and they can place barricades in an area, and they are not considered terrain elements, but they have a size of 1. An engineer can also set fire to a building, and this is a fire token that is then placed on that building, and it can inflict wounds on units and damages buildings in the area. Damage to buildings are indicated with these damage tokens, and they are played on that area. The game uses several types of dice. There's yellow, white, black and red dice, and also the purple larger dice. And they all have different faces. I'm showing all of the faces that each of these dice have here, except for this one. This one has this sword, this wounded man twice. It has two of these feet and this goat's head. I'll explain what those icons mean. So the shield is a defense roll. So whenever you roll a shield on your defense, when somebody else is attacking your units, they may discard one of the attacker's results by first choosing from one of these other results, which can be the sword, which is the kill result. It instantly kills a unit. Unless it has hit points, then it deals a wound. There's the disrupt, which is the bandaged head here. And when a unit does not have any hit points on its card, it is disrupted and placed into the disrupted section of the infirmary, which I will show you in a bit. There's the push symbol, and this means the attacked unit is pushed back. The attacker chooses an adjacent free or enemy area where the unit must move, observing the rules of capacity of one area. And if it cannot move to any adjacent area, then the unit suffers a disrupt result instead. So whenever you roll a shield on defense, first you cancel out the kills, then the disrupts, and then the pushes. These purple dice for the giant units that are in the game have the same faces. They also have two disrupts, a push, a kill, but they also have two of these big feet on them, and that's a trample result, and that is treated as an automatic push that applies to all units in the affected area with no possible defense roll. Finally, there's the doom die that resolves the fate of disrupted units. Whenever a unit is disrupted, it gets placed into the infirmary over here on the battle board. At the end of a round, when all the disrupted units from the battle have been placed in the infirmary, starting with the first player, each player rolls the doom die. They must roll the doom die for each of their units in the infirmary, and they must state which unit the roll is for before rolling. If a player rolls this death symbol, then that unit is destroyed and moved to the graveyard. If they roll a disrupt symbol, then the unit simply stays in the infirmary for another round. If the rally symbol is rolled, then you can take that unit and place it back on the board at the indicated rally spot. Finally, you can roll a delayed rally, which is this symbol here, and those units are placed over here in the waiting section of the infirmary, and they will be automatically rallied at the end of the next turn. During a game of Joan of Arc, you will have several phases. The first phase is the council phase, in which you will turn over the first card of the round deck, which is this, and it will tell you how many activations each player will get, in this case 2 regular activations. Each player then takes that many activation cubes and places it on their player board. Then you draw the first 3 cards of the War Council deck and you place them in what is called the river. These 3 cards need to be different. If a duplicate card is drawn, discard it and draw a new one. Then starting with first player, each player must designate 1 War Council card from the river and apply its effects. Multiple players may choose the same card if they wish. All of these cards are explained in the rulebook. For example, this card will simply give you 3 XP tokens, and this card will turn a regular activation into a charge activation. Finally, there's the upkeep phase, in which each player must spend 1 XP token for each level 2 character that they have. Otherwise, it will revert back to its level 1 state. That concludes the council phase, and the second phase is the first player's turn. So the player with the first player marker will use and play orders, and then place any unused orders in the reserve, which I will show you in a bit. The third phase is the second player's turn, and possible third and fourth player's turn. And finally, there's the camp phase, in which you do the casualties check by rolling the doom die. Any characters on the board where there's a fire token take fire damage. And finally, there's the endgame and victory check to see if anyone won the game. So after the council phase, players will take turns activating their units. Players must use at least one order cube on each of their turns if they have at least one, and each order must be resolved before moving on to the next one. There are activation orders, charge orders, reactivation orders, and interrupts. Reactivation, charge, and interrupt orders may also be played as if they were a regular activation order, and an activation, charge, or interrupt order cannot be placed in an area that already contains an order. An order placed in an area activates that area and all the units in it, regardless whether a unit was activated earlier in the turn. Each unit does its individual action, and they can be the same or a different action. When multiple units in an area are moved, they are always moved at the same time, and there can be only one movement action to the same area from a single activation. Similarly, there can only be one attack, melee or shooting, per target area during a single activation. So that means when you attack, you add up all the attacking units' dice and do one big attack onto an area that has enemy units. So a regular activation simply activates all the units in an area, in this case these archers. A charge action can be used with infantry or cavalry units that have the charge skill on their card, and it allows them to perform a charge action. This action allows infantry to move one area and attack, or cavalry to move two areas and attack, as a single activation. Units in the same area without the charge skill are activated as normal. The reactivation order can be placed in an area that already contains an order, and this allows the same area to be activated twice in the same turn. The interrupt order is the only order which is played during an opponent's turn. It is played after the active player has resolved an order and before they play another. This means a player must always complete an order before an interrupt order can be played in their turn. This order cannot be played in an area already containing an order. At the end of your turn, any unused orders may be placed in the reserve down here with a maximum of 3. Any more than that will be lost. Orders in your reserve can be used on your next turn. Remember that some character units can also perform orders to another area. So if this person, for example, the red player, first wanted to activate this area and have the bowmen attack, then they could both attack these cavalry units. Let's say that this unit was destroyed. Then that player could place a reactivation cube over here and perhaps make them move over there. And then he wanted to activate with one of these cubes this character, and then before or after its own action it could perform the bonus action that is on his card. So let's say it's this character here who has an adjacent area. He can command 2 allied units. So that means that this hero could make these 2 archers perform another action. They could move or they could attack, and then he could still do his own action, for example, move with them. So those are the 4 different orders you can give to your units. Let's go over the different actions you can take. There are many different actions that your units can take, so let's go over them one by one. First of all, units may move. A unit may only move from one area to another by crossing the border between 2 adjacent areas. Note that hex tiles which only meet at the corner are not adjacent. So that means this area and this area is not adjacent, and movement would have to go through this area first. A movement action is always from one area to another unless that character has the haste ability. In this case, haste 2 means it can move 2 areas. Note that some units that can be leveled up, such as this hero over here, has an additional faction symbol, and that means that this hero cannot move into an allied area that has another hero that has upgraded to the other faction. So for example, this is a holy hero. If that player also had an unholy hero, then they could not be in the same area together. You can also move into a building, like I said before, and those areas are considered neutral and can therefore accommodate units from opposing sides, even level 2 allied units with opposing faction banners. Another action units can do is to attack. There are two types of attacks, melee and shooting. Only units with the melee attack icon can perform melee attacks, and units with the ranged attack icon can do a shooting attack. Melee attacks are always declared into an adjacent area and are never blocked by terrain. Shooting attacks are declared against an adjacent area or an area up to a maximum number of hexes away as determined by the range stat. This is located above the shooting attack icon, in this case a 2. This symbol indicates an arcing shot and that can target any area within range. This shooting area only has a range of 1, and that can target an area within range up to and including the first blocking area. So the type of terrain in the target area may modify the attack and or defense rules. In addition, some terrain types may even block shooting attacks completely. All attacking units in an area, so for example if these two units were attacking this unit over here, and these attack with 2 red dice, that means you take 4 red dice, 2 for each unit, and add them to your common attack pool. Defending units do the same with their defense dice, so in this case the bowman would only have 1 white die, and both dice pools are rolled and resolved as usual. Some units may have retaliation, and that skill can apply any kill, disrupt or push results from their defense roll to any attacking melee unit. The attacking player suffering that retaliation cannot use any shield results from their attack roll to cancel retaliation results. You can also follow up after a combat, and that means that after a melee attack and defense rolls have been resolved, if that adjacent area is empty, then the attacker may move into that area with some or all of the attacking units. Only units that contributed with dice or bonuses to the melee attack may follow up, observing area capacity rules. Another action units can do is to recruit civilians. This is a bonus action, so it is free action, and when a player's unit moves into or starts its activation in an area where there is at least 1 civilian, such as this, so this area gets activated, then they may recruit any civilians in that area. For each civilian recruited, the player takes the corresponding unit card and places it next to his player board. The civilian is now considered as a unit belonging to that player and no longer as a civilian. To indicate this, you can take one of your colored bases and place that civilian on that. Another action you can take is to wait to have a unit simply stay in their area and do nothing. So that means if you have multiple units in an area and you activate that area and you move some of those, you don't have to move all of them. There are also actions that are only available to characters, the larger cards. And one of those is discussion, which is a bonus action, and that can be performed with a unit that has this speech icon. When a character is in the same area as a unit with the discussion icon, it can perform the discussion action with that unit. Its owner then takes the 4 discussion cards corresponding to the level 1 unit, so that's the 1 star below the citizen symbol in the top left there, with the question side visible, shuffles them and draws the card from the bottom of the deck. From the question side of that card, the player then chooses a question with no faction banner attached to it, which is question A or B, or one with a faction banner matching their characters. So in this case, if he was upgraded to an unholy character, he would ask question C. Questions printed in red imply a risk for the character, but their effects are likely to bring them greater benefits. The player then reads the question aloud, then hands the card to their opponent, indicating which option they chose, A, B, C, or D, and the opponent then reads aloud the answer that corresponds with that question from the back of the card. Any effects described by the answer are then applied to the player who performed the discussion action, and those effects can trigger a test by rolling a die. A discussion action either ends there or is followed up by a level 2 card. There's 2 of those, and you shuffle those and draw one at random and can do the same. But a character can only perform one discussion action per turn. Once a character has resolved a discussion with a civilian, that miniature has to be removed from the game along with its card. Another action characters can do is to command, which I have already discussed. And another bonus action a character can use is to use an equipment card. So we have 2 different types of equipment cards, and they are obtained as a result of a discussion and may be placed on the character who performed the discussion as a bonus action. Equipment can be either tactics with the blue gem on the back or myth with the yellow gem on the back. A character cannot have more than 2 equipment cards at any time, and they may discard equipment cards at any time or give them to another character in the same area. Once placed on the character, they provide a permanent or one-time bonus to the wearer depending on the effect described on the card. When a character is destroyed, their equipment cards are discarded. And the last bonus action a character can do is to upgrade from level 1 to level 2. Next, there are several skill actions which are available only for units with specific skills. All the skills are listed on your player aid and in the rulebook, and skills that require an action are haste, jump, charge, prayer, heal, and engineering actions. Haste means that units may move up to a number of areas on their move action indicated on the card. Like I showed here earlier, this mounted bowman have haste 2, so instead of moving 1, they could move 2 areas. There are also units that have a jump ability, and when the unit performs this action, remove its miniature from the game board and place it on any allied or free area that is not full within X consecutive areas of its starting area. Then there is the charge action, and it's only available for units with the charge skill who have been activated by a charge order. When performing a charge, cavalry units can move up to 2 areas and make a melee attack, and infantry units can move 1 area and make a melee attack. Units cannot charge into or from a building interior, nor into or from a swamp area. Next, there is the prayer skill, like this priest here. And when a unit uses this action, its owner may take 1 XP or a legend token from the common pool and place it on their player board. The heal action, which is also on this priest here, removes 1 wound token from the card of a character located in the same area as the unit performing the action. And finally, like I mentioned before, there are units with the engineer skill, and they can place barricades or set fire. The barricade action can only be performed in a forest, village, building interior area, or in an area containing a building. There can only be 1 barricade token per area, and it takes up 1 space. When an area containing a barricade token is attacked, it provides 1 extra white defense die against both melee and shooting attacks to all units in its area and prevents follow-up after combat. Setting fire is easy. You can either place a fire token in its area and perform a bonus movement action afterwards, or remove a fire token from its area. There can only be 1 fire token per area. And finally, there are player actions that are performed by the players themselves, not by units, and do not require an order to be played. And that is to either play a legend card from the legend deck. Players can acquire these cards during the game, and there's the mythical and the tactical cards. And players may play any legend card from their hand by spending the number of legend tokens indicated on the card. So here's 1 or 2 tokens, and after the effect of the card has been resolved, it is discarded face up. When the legend deck runs out of cards, shuffle the discarded legend cards and assemble a new deck. Players can also trigger an intrigue from their intrigue card. They simply pick any of the effects listed on their intrigue card at any time during their turn by placing the required number of intrigue tokens on that spot on their card. You resolve the effect, and the tokens remain on the intrigue card to indicate which effect was triggered, as each effect can only be triggered once. A player may exchange at any time and as many times as they want one unused intrigue token for one XP or legend token. Finally, there are some additional rules in the rulebook concerning gigantic creatures that have their own dashboard, their own purple dice like I showed you earlier, and they have different orders and movement, attacks, and there are also flying units that use the blue sky tiles as well, the sky board. There are war machines as well that have limited movement. They depend on a crew. They take structural damage. And in the end of the rulebook, all the skills are explained in detail as well. There's a glossary of some of these terms that are used in the rules and in the game. And that covers the basics of the rules for Time of Legends Joan of Arc. Let's go to my final thoughts. So, my final thoughts on Time of Legends Joan of Arc by Mythic Games. Well, let me start with the components. So first of all, you get a lot of components. There are over 230 miniatures in this box alone, and there are so many, and the detail of the miniatures is really good. I was really surprised by how much detail they have considering their size. They're only 16 millimeters for the the human characters, and there's a lot of these big creatures as well. I mean, you just look at that beast over there. It is absolutely huge. And they came in the reliquary box, which was an extra box you got with the pledge on Kickstarter. And there's just so much here, so many miniatures and so much content. It's amazing. This is really a box that is chock full of figures. There's lots of tiles. There are many of these tiles, and you can build, a huge number of maps. There are lots and lots of cards. So there are many units, of course, because there are so many miniatures. You also have different units, and there is more on the cards because you sometimes use the same models for a different kind of unit. So there are plenty of tokens as well. You have all these tokens, cardboard tokens, and the components are really good. You have the wooden cubes, and if you added the plunder box to your pledge, you will also have these activation markers, which are banners, and you put stickers on them in these 4 colors of your different activations. So you could use those instead of the cubes, but I think the cubes work very well. They're brightly colored and they stand out easily on the map, so that works well as well. The game also comes with a lot of scenarios. You get a scenario book with the game, and there are also going to be scenarios posted online on the Mythic Games website. I'll put a link in the description below so you can go and download those as well. So you'll get more content as time progresses, and they will also they are currently working on it, a app for your computer where you can actually build your own maps. So you can, in 3D, you can build your own maps and you can post those online. You can build your own scenarios, you can put models on it and everything. So, in the future, users of the game, owners of the game, will also start making content and share that with the community, so you can get so much more content that already comes in the box, which is quite amazing. So with those scenarios alone, you have a lot of gameplay with this game. And then there's also the battle mode where you just build an army, and the battle mode can also be found on their Mythic Games download page. And it gives you lists of the early 100-year wars, English and French armies, the late 100-year wars, English and French armies, mythical armies, both the unholy and the holy faction. So there's already 6 lists of army units that you can build your army from, but you can also just free build. They're also working on a list that has the costs of all those units, so you can just mix and match. You can build an unlimited number of different armies, and then there are some suggested maps that you can play on as well. And of course there as well you can build your own maps So the possibilities are literally limitless, and that just gives you so much content in just the base game. And then there are expansions. There's the Siege expansion, which adds tiles with a moat and actual 3D castle walls and towers, so you can build an entire castle, and one player will be besieging that castle, the other player will be defending it. So that looks great as well. There's a village expansion which adds more civilians, more buildings, more tiles. There was a apocalypse expansion with the horsemen of the apocalypse and more mythical monsters and battles to be fought. There's a box that has Hell Unleashed with a giant devil model in it as well. There's the dragon, of course, and you know that is just a huge model alone, and you can fight that with the angels. Super cool. So there are plenty of expansions, and there are new expansions upcoming even, because late 2019 in the fall, Mythic Games will have a new Kickstarter for Time of Legends Joan of Arc Teutonic Knights. And that is an expansion to this game, and it will also have the base game again in the 1.5 edition. So it will have some revisions made to the rules, some upgrades, and it will also be available for, of course, for new backers, but also for returning backers. So I guess there will be some kind of upgrade kit that you can get. And so there will be a new expansion, and all of the content that's already made will be available on that Kickstarter as well. So if you missed out on the first one and you're interested, check that out, fall 2019. So that is not too long from now. So basically, with Time of Legends Joan of Arc, you are getting a full war game experience in a box. So that means if you're into war games and you like what you see here, then this is definitely a great addition to your collection. Or if you're a casual player and you wanted to, you know, try out a war game, but you didn't want to spend hundreds of dollars or euros on single armies or army units like you have in Warhammer, because that's quite an investment, although it's a very popular game, of course. You just want to have that one game that, you know, scratches that itch, then this is also a very good solution, because you get a lot of bang for your buck. So that is basically just talking about the content. So let's talk about the presentation. Again, like I said, the miniatures have a high level of detail, but also the artwork just not alone on the box, but also on the tiles, on the cards, is absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of cards, so there is also a lot of artwork. So I can forgive Mythic Games for having recycled a few of the art pieces for different units, because there are just so many. So you will notice when you're going through the cards that you will have the same artwork for different units now and then, but there are just so many, and the artwork is so good that it just really, it pops. It's quite amazing, and the cards themselves, the quality of the cards is really good. They're quite thick. They seem to have a kind of a linen finish, I think. Well, these are pretty smooth, the bigger ones. I believe the smaller ones, they actually feel quite thick, and so the quality of the cards is very good as well. The tiles have a good thickness. All the tokens have a very good thickness as well. So all of that is very high quality too. One thing that I wish they had done is that these bases that come with the base game, there aren't enough to have all of these models glued on these bases. And I would suggest gluing them, because when you're playing a game like this and you want to move a unit, you want to pick them up at the top with one of these units. But as you can see, I'm just taking it off of the base if you don't glue it. So I have to pick up the entire base and make sure I have a steady hand, because if I don't, then my miniatures will fall off and you'll have to put them back on again, and maybe you're knocking over another one, and that's just a bit of a hassle. So really you want to glue them to the bases, and that means you need extra bases. Now the Kickstarter had a pillage box, which also came with these standees for your activation markers, and it came with extra bases, enabling you to actually glue them so you'd have enough of those. And I highly recommend getting that. So if you're an existing backer or if you're a new backer and you want to get this, then during the fall Kickstarter, make sure you get extra bases. If they offer the plunder box again, just add that to your pledge because it's really helpful. And these standees, these banners are also pretty nice. They look nice on the board, and the cubes work as well. But they're nice. They're a nice addition. I'm also not sure if there are enough colored clips for all the bases. So far, I've had enough with the games I've played, but I haven't played the huge scenarios yet with the bigger armies. And when you're building your own army and you're using units that have a different stat on the card, so different cards, different units, but they use the same miniatures, then you need to be able to discern which miniature, which models are which unit. And that's when you start using different colors. So aside from the red and the blue, you also have the white and the black rings. And you can use those. So, the blue player might take the white bases as well, and the red player might take the black ones. And then, use those to discern the different units. But for some reason, I don't find that ideal, especially if you're playing a scenario with 3 or 4 players. You're going to need those different colors. So I'm not sure what the best way would be to fix that. Maybe have different hues of the same color, like a light blue or a pink or a like gray for the black player and yellow for the white player. I don't know. That is an option, but I'd like to see a way to make it easier to discern, different units that use the same models within the same army. Another point about this game that I do not find to be a negative point per se, it's kind of, in the eye of the beholder, is the fact that there are a lot of rules to this game. Now, the basic rules that I explained in this video are simple enough. You can get through these relatively quickly. The phases in a turn are relatively easy. You have your phase here where you turn over the cards and you take your orders. Then both players activate their units and play out the fight. And then you have the cleanup, you have an upkeep. And all of that is pretty clear. And the real challenge lies with all the different units and their skills in particular, because there are a lot of skills. And as you have seen on the player aid, there is a whole list of different kinds of skills that these units can have. And you really need to know what they do in order to play a good game, because you want to know what your units can do, but you also want to know what you're up against. So you really need to learn what all those skills do, and that might take some time. And you might be playing a game and then forget about it and you have to look it up, which is why the player aid is so handy. But still, you're going to be looking up a lot of information while playing. The same goes with some of the rules, the interactions. There are a lot of ifs and buts, and when I do this, can I do that? There will be questions. The first couple of games you play, you will be looking up things, and you might not immediately find them in the rule book. You'll have to check the frequently asked questions online, and I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. And it's good that there is a FAQ online, because Mythic Games do listen to their backers, and they have tried to improve on the game. They're still working on it, and that is going to be addressed in the fall Kickstarter as well. So they are continuously working on this. But, as a first-time player of a game like this, you might find that a bit of a hassle to have to look up lots of stuff. But that is inherent to a more complex game like this. I mean, this is quite the elaborate war game. So, the rules are bound to be elaborate as well. So it does need some time investment, and not just for yourself, but also for the people you're playing with. So you do need to have at least one person, a loved one, family, partner, or friends that are equally interested in this game and are willing to invest time to learn it, and of course, to play it regularly with you, because, you know, otherwise it is going to be a hassle to have to explain those rules again and again to different players, and you'll be explaining longer than actually playing the game, perhaps, because also the setup of this game is also very long, but more on that later. Because what I found is that this game, because of its, you know, giant amount of components, it needs an organizer, because it's a big box and there's a lot of components. And when you open the box for the first time, you'll have punch boards. So you start punching all those tokens, and you have a mountain of tokens, and you have bags with miniatures. You open the bags and you have a mountain of miniatures. And not all of them have inserts for them. So the game comes with these plain brown cardboard boxes with plastic inserts that have a lot of those bigger miniatures and the special units as well, and the unique characters. But there's also trays that have just a square tray with lots of smaller miniatures in them, which works as long as you don't glue them to the bases, because when you do, then it's going to be very difficult to fit it in again. You'll be tossing out the cardboard boxes and the plastic inserts, because once glued to the bases, they won't fit in there anymore, and you'll just have a big empty box with nothing inside to just toss everything in. Now, the tokens and the cards are fine. You can put those in Ziploc bags. There is no Ziploc bags with the game, so you'll have to buy some. That would have been nice if that was included, but fortunately Ziploc bags are very cheap, so I just bought a pack of them, and I started putting in all the tokens and all the cards, and that will keep those nicely organized and together. But, you know, all these miniatures, they need to have a spot in the box, so the box is really in need of an organizer. Now, I did read that Mythic Games is working on a big solution storage box. So who knows, they may have something depending on how they plan on storing everything. I hope they keep in mind that players will be gluing their miniatures on the bases, so how they are going to deal with that, I do not know. We'll have to see. But that would be an interesting addition to the game, to have a good organizer. And I'm sure there's parties out there like Folded Space who make inserts for any games that will come up with a solution for this as well, maybe, who knows. Otherwise, you might have to build one yourself from foam core. I do suggest, if you're inviting someone over to play this with you, set it up before they arrive so you can just start. Unless you're army building, then you might need some extra time. So that is a thing. That is an issue with this game. Huge setup. And when you're done putting it all back in the box, again, quite a bit time consuming. Another thing about the game is I do think it is a very good battle game, very good skirmish game. It feels like the armies are balanced, depending on how you build your army, of course. You will, by playing the battle mode, you will learn what units have certain strength and what units are best to use against those. For example, the English have very powerful archers that can shoot 2 hexes away. They disregard areas on those hexes, just 2 hexes away. So they have a huge range, and when they are on a hill, they have +1 to that. So, you know, if there are hills on your map, they can reach, you know, almost the entire map. And that makes them very dangerous, because they will be shooting arrows at you constantly. So you need to get in there quick and take them out. And they can put stakes down too. So you need to figure out what units are best against those archers. And then the English player is going to say, okay, so he's going to come in with cavalry. I need to do something against that. And that's how you learn what units are effective against what other units. And I like that in a game. It's figuring out how to play this as strategically as possible. And you learn as you go. It's really a nice experience. But something that some players may not enjoy is that it is dice-driven combat. There's plenty of dice, and there's, you know, the different colors that have different faces on them, and the units are all different. They have different attack stats, different defense stats, some have retaliation, and that, I think that is a lot of fun. I like, pooling together my army, seeing, okay, this unit has these dice, that unit has these dice, and you have a handful of dice and you're throwing them down your dice tower or on the table. And that is just a lot of fun. You're picking the results, and then the defender sees which units are attacked and takes all those dice, rolls them, what cancels each other out, do I have retaliation? To me, that's a lot of fun, but not everybody enjoys this dice-driven combat because there is randomness involved. Some people want purely strategic war games where just the units have certain abilities and they attack with this amount of damage, and these units defend with that amount of defense, and that just cancels each other out or works that way. So it is not for everybody. It is a dice-driven combat game. Regardless, I still think there is a lot of strategy. Like I said, you have to figure out which units to use when you're army building. You have to strategize. How do I use these units in this scenario? Do I just full-on attack, or do I circumvent? Do I just try to charge ahead? You need to figure that out. So there is still a lot of strategy, even though that the battle outcomes use dice. I love these dice, by the way. They're nice, they're clear, the colors are bright, there are engraved faces on them, the big chunky monster dice are cool. I like the fact that you're also using a die to determine the fate of your disrupted units. Are they rallying? Are they waiting another round to rally, or do they just die right there? And that to me is a lot of fun as well. You have a chance to bring back disrupted units. So yeah, that is basically it. Another thing I should mention is that because of the size of the miniatures, I think this game is ideal for starting painters. Because of the tiny size of these figures, you can achieve a tabletop standard quality paint job relatively easy, because you just basically apply base coats. You just color all the colors you want on this figure and you paint them in. And there are even decal stickers for shields in the box as well, so that will have a nice effect. Maybe apply a little bit of shading with a wash, and that'll be it. And it will already look good because it's so small. You won't be able to see a lot of detail unless you pick them up and look at them really closely. So, they're small, they're on the table, and they will look good no matter if you're, just a starting painter. And you'll be able to paint a lot of these relatively quickly because they are so small. All right, so let me summarize for the people who wanted to skip my lengthy review. So first of all, big plus is the great value of the game. Lots of miniatures, lots of cards, lots of tiles, plenty of scenarios. You got battle mode, so you got a lot of replayability. So replayability wise and content wise, you'll get a lot of bang for your buck from this game. The component quality is also another big plus. The miniatures have a lot of detail. The cardboard is very thick. The cardstock is thick. The colors are nice and bright. The artwork is fantastic. The miniatures provide a nice way to paint them because they're so small. They're easier to paint for the beginning painter. You'll achieve tabletop quality relatively easily. A negative point is that you do need the plunder box to get enough bases should you want to glue them to the bases, which would save you a lot of setup time. So I do suggest getting more bases. You might not have enough colored bases if you are using different units which use similar miniatures. You need to figure something out to discern between those units, which is not a problem if you're playing 2 players because you have 4 color clips. But if you're playing 3 or 4 players, you might be, you might have to find some other way to solve that. Another neutral point is the time investment. There are a lot of rules. The basic rules are simple, but you do have to learn all the skills. So that I think that's a bit of the fun of the game. You do have to invest a lot of time in learning it, and you will have to look up some things when you're playing the first couple of games, when you're new at this. And you also need to have at least one friend to be able to invest as much time in this as yourself, to play this with you. But on the positive side, there is a FAQ online, there are errata online, there will be a 1.5 edition upgrade, presumably in the fall 2019 Kickstarter of this game, so keep an eye on that. Like I said, the setup and the breakdown takes a long time because there are simply so many units, so many models, so many tiles in the game that setup is going to take a long time. And the game needs an organizer. Right now you got the plain boxes with the inserts, the plastic trays, and if you glue them to the bases, they won't fit in there anymore, and you'll toss those plain boxes out, and you'll end up with a big empty box with no insert, no organizers, and you'll just be tossing everything in there in plastic bags, and that is not ideal. Like I said, a positive for some and negative for others is the dice-driven combat. So it is a highly strategic game, but the outcome of battles is determined by dice rolling. And another positive thing I haven't even mentioned before is the theme. I really like the theme of this game, and it really comes out in all the artwork and the miniatures. So that's another big positive point for me. All in all, I think this is a fantastic war game. You really get the full war game experience in one box. I love it. I'm giving it a huge 2 thumbs up. There's just so much content, not just physical content, but also, replayability. And there's just a whole lot of stuff in this box. There are many expansions, like I mentioned. There will be a new expansion in the fall Kickstarter. Check that out by clicking the link in the description below. And the entire range of Joan of Arc products will be available during that Kickstarter. Mythic Games is also making a new standalone game set in the Joan of Arc universe called A Time of Legends Destinies, which is a competitive, story-driven exploration adventure game that uses an app. So it's kind of like an RPG, but it is competitive. So that will be coming out as well. So that is it, my review of A Time of Legends Joan of Arc by Mythic Games. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.